I used to work the night shift at a Walmart in a small town. It wasn't exactly my dream job, but it paid the bills and gave me plenty of time to be by myself. You'd think that working in retail during the quiet hours of the night would be uneventful, just a lot of stocking shelves and keeping the place tidy. But it was anything but peaceful. I remember one night, a Tuesday if I recall correctly, when something happened that I still can't shake, even now. It was around 2 a.m., and the store was completely dead. Not a soul around except for me and my two coworkers, Sarah and Jake, who were both in different sections of the store. I was working in the electronics department, unpacking a new shipment of TVs. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the distant hum of the refrigerators in the back droned on, creating this strange sense of isolation. About an hour in, I heard the sound of a shopping cart squeaking down one of the aisles. That wasn't strange in itself. Sometimes we got late-night customers, though they were few and far between. What did strike me as odd was that I hadn't heard the front doors open, nor had I seen anyone come in. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe one of my coworkers was moving some stock around. But as I went back to unpacking, the squeaking continued, slow and deliberate, like someone was casually strolling down the aisles. I figured I'd check it out. As I rounded the corner into the main aisle, I froze. There, in the dim light, was a man. He was tall, dressed in dirty jeans and a flannel shirt, with a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. But what stood out most was his shopping cart. It was filled to the brim with strange items, dozens of baby dolls, each one missing a limb or an eye. There was also an assortment of old electronics, the kind we hadn't sold in years, like old VCRs and cassette players. It looked like he'd been walking the aisles for hours, just picking up whatever he found. "Can I help you find something?" I asked, trying to mask the unease in my voice. He didn't respond. He just stood there, gripping the handle of the cart, staring at me. I couldn't see his eyes under the brim of his hat, but I could feel his gaze, heavy and unsettling. I can help you with whatever you're looking for," I stammered, stepping closer, though every instinct in me screamed to back away. Still, he said nothing. His silence was thick, suffocating, and the longer I stood there, the more unnerved I became. I glanced down at his cart again, and that's when I noticed something else. A small, stained backpack stuffed between the broken toys and electronics. Something about it gave me the chills, though I couldn't place why. Without saying another word, the man turned and pushed his cart toward the back of the store, the wheels squeaking loudly in the empty space. I stood there for a moment, watching him disappear around the corner. My heart was racing, and I felt cold, a deep kind of cold that settled in my bones. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to follow him, to see what he was up to, but another part of me, the smarter part, was screaming to just leave it alone. I decided to find Jake and Sarah. Maybe they'd seen him, or at least they could help me figure out what to do next. I quickly made my way to the grocery section where I knew Sarah was stocking shelves. I found her crouched down in the cereal aisle, loading boxes onto the bottom shelf. "Sarah," I whispered, "there's this guy wandering around. He's strange." She gave me a puzzled look. "Strange how?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain the unsettling feeling he gave me. "He's just off. His cart's full of these broken toys and old electronics, and there's something in his backpack. I don't know. He just feels wrong." Sarah stood up and wiped her hands on her jeans. "Maybe he's just a hoarder or something. I'll come check it out." We walked toward the back of the store where I'd last seen him. The cart squeaking had stopped, and the store was eerily quiet now, as if the whole place was holding its breath. I led her to the electronics aisle, but the man was gone. "Where did he go?" I muttered, more to myself than to Sarah. We looked around for a few minutes, searching down the main aisle and peeking into some of the smaller sections. Just as we were about to give up, Sarah froze. "Wait, do you hear that?" she whispered. I strained my ears, and then I heard it. A faint humming sound, almost like someone was quietly singing. But it wasn't a melody I recognized. It was off-key and unsettling, like someone trying to mimic a lullaby, but getting it horribly wrong. We followed the sound, which led us toward the back storage area. The closer we got, the louder the humming became. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was disjointed, broken, and the voice, it sounded like it belonged to a child. My stomach turned. When we reached the doors to the stockroom, Sarah looked at me, her face pale. "We should get Jake. This is too weird." But before we could turn back, the humming stopped, replaced by the unmistakable creak of a door opening. Without thinking, I pushed the door to the stockroom open just a crack. There, standing in the middle of the room, was the man. He had his back to us, but he was staring down at the ground. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing, but then it hit me. There were no toys in his cart anymore. It was completely empty, except for that small, stained backpack. And scattered all over the floor were the baby dolls. They weren't broken anymore, though. They were positioned, arranged, in a circle, each one staring up at the ceiling with their empty, glassy eyes. The man was humming again, that same awful tune, and this time it was louder, more deliberate, like a ritual. Sarah grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "We need to go, now." But as we started to back away, the man suddenly stopped humming. He didn't move for a long moment, and then, in a voice that chilled me to my core, he spoke without turning around. "They never stop watching." Sarah gasped, and we bolted from the stockroom, running as fast as we could through the aisles. My heart was hammering in my chest, and the lights above seemed to flicker as we ran. We found Jake by the front registers, completely unaware of what was going on. I quickly explained what we saw, but Jake just laughed it off. "Come on, guys. You're messing with me, right?" We begged him to check it out, and reluctantly, he agreed. We all headed back to the stockroom, my legs feeling heavier with each step. I dreaded what we might find when we got there, but when we opened the door, the room was empty. No dolls, no man, nothing. Jake gave us both a look that screamed, "I told you so." But Sarah and I were left standing there, shaken to our cores. We hadn't imagined it. That man, those dolls, something was terribly wrong with him. Later that night, as the end of our shift approached, I was in the break room trying to calm down. Sarah had already clocked out, and Jake was finishing up some paperwork. I kept telling myself that it was over, that I wouldn't see that man again. But as I looked up at the security monitor in the break room, my blood ran cold. There, on the grainy black and white screen, was the man. He was standing by the entrance, just outside the automatic doors. He wasn't pushing a cart this time. He wasn't humming. He was just standing there, staring at the camera. His face was obscured by the hat, but I knew it was him. I felt a chill run down my spine, and my hands started to shake. I called for Jake, who came in and stared at the screen, equally disturbed. He picked up the phone and dialed the police, but as we watched the screen, the man slowly backed away, disappearing into the night. The police came, but there wasn't much they could do. There was no sign of him outside when they arrived, and they couldn't file a report on someone just standing around. They told us to let them know if he came back, but that was little comfort. For weeks after that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I worked the night shift, I'd glance up at the security monitors, half expecting to see him there, just outside the doors, staring in. And then, one night, I did. I was clocking out after another long shift when I noticed the monitor. There he was again, standing in the same spot, his face still obscured. This time, though, something was different. In his hand, he held one of the baby dolls, its head twisted at an unnatural angle. I blinked, and just like before, he backed away into the darkness, leaving nothing but the eerie memory of his presence. I quit my job at Walmart soon after that. I couldn't handle the constant fear, the dread that I might turn a corner one day and find him waiting for me. Sometimes I still see him in my dreams or in the shadows of my own home, always watching, always waiting. I've always been a night owl, so when I needed to grab a few things from Walmart, it seemed natural to go late at night. It's quieter, less crowded, and I could usually get in and out without any hassle. I live in a small town, and our local Walmart is open 24 hours, which was convenient for someone like me who dreaded the usual daytime chaos. It was around 1 a.m. when I pulled into the parking lot. There were only a handful of cars scattered around, mostly near the entrance. The automatic doors slid open with that familiar mechanical hum, and a blast of cool, conditioned air hit me as I stepped inside. The place was almost eerily quiet, the usual chatter and clatter replaced by the soft whirring of overhead lights and the distant hum of freezers in the back. I grabbed a cart and started my shopping, not really paying much attention to my surroundings. The store was huge, and I figured I was probably one of the only customers in there, aside from a couple of late-night stalkers. The first 15 minutes were uneventful. Just me, wandering up and down aisles, tossing random items into my cart. Some snacks, toiletries, a few groceries. But then, as I turned into the electronics section, I noticed something that made me stop in my tracks. At the far end of the aisle, there was a man standing completely still, staring at the wall of TVs. He was tall and dressed in an oversized hoodie, with the hood pulled up, obscuring most of his face. His posture was stiff, almost unnatural, and his head was tilted slightly, as if he was fixated on something on the screen. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just checking out the TVs, deciding which one he wanted. But something about the way he was standing, the complete stillness of his body, felt off. It was like he was frozen there, his eyes locked onto the blank TV screens, which weren't even playing anything. I moved on, telling myself not to overthink it. People do weird things sometimes, right? But as I pushed my cart toward the grocery section, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My mind kept drifting back to that man, the way he just stood there, unmoving. About 10 minutes later, I was in the frozen foods aisle, checking out some ice cream, when I felt it again. That sensation of being watched. I slowly turned my head, and there he was again, at the other end of the aisle. This time, he wasn't looking at any products. He was staring directly at me. His hood still obscured most of his face, but I could just make out the shadow of his eyes beneath it, fixed on me like I was the only thing in the store. My heart started to race, but I tried to keep my cool. I forced a smile, gave a quick nod, and continued shopping, though my hands were trembling as I shoved the ice cream into my cart. I told myself he was probably just some weird guy who didn't know social boundaries. But the longer I stayed in the store, the more I felt that heavy, oppressive gaze following me. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I grabbed the last few things I needed and headed toward the front of the store, trying to avoid looking over my shoulder. I just wanted to get out of there. As I approached the self-checkout lanes, I felt a wave of relief. There was an employee standing nearby, an older man, wiping down one of the registers. I moved to one of the open kiosks, scanning my items as quickly as I could. The sound of the beeps was the only thing breaking the eerie silence. Then, I glanced up at the large curved mirror hanging from the ceiling, the kind meant to deter shoplifters. My heart skipped a beat. The man was there, standing in the main aisle just behind me. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, watching me from the reflection in the mirror. His face was still hidden under the hood, but his posture, it was as if he was waiting for something. I tried to act normal, scanning my items faster now, my hands shaking. I didn't want to show fear, but every instinct in my body was screaming at me to leave, to get out before something terrible happened. I kept my eyes glued to the scanner, refusing to look at him directly. When I finished, I quickly shoved my receipt into my pocket and turned toward the exit. I didn't run, but my pace quickened. I could feel my pulse in my throat as I neared the sliding doors, and for a second, I thought I'd made it out. But then, just as I passed through the entrance, the automatic doors sliding shut behind me, I heard it. A slow, deliberate set of footsteps. He was following me. I didn't stop to think. I sprinted across the parking lot, fumbling for my keys. The lot was mostly empty, and the dim streetlights barely cut through the fog that had settled over the area. My car felt miles away. I could hear the footsteps behind me, slow and steady, never speeding up, but always there. He was walking, but he didn't need to run. He knew I couldn't get away fast enough. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my keys. I cursed under my breath, kneeling down to pick them up. That's when I saw his reflection in my car window. He was standing just a few feet behind me, still and silent, his hood pulled low. I didn't even bother opening the door properly. I grabbed my keys, unlocked the car, and practically threw myself inside, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands fumbled with the ignition, but finally, the engine roared to life. I backed out of the parking spot so fast I nearly hit the curb and sped out of the lot, not daring to look in my rearview mirror until I was halfway down the road. When I finally looked back, there was no one there. The parking lot was empty, just as it had been when I arrived. But I knew what I saw. I knew that man had been following me. For the next few nights, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see him, standing there, staring at me from beneath that hood. I tried to tell myself it was just a weird encounter, that maybe the guy was harmless. But deep down, I knew there was something more to it, something darker. A few days later, I was scrolling through local news online when I stumbled across a headline that made my blood run cold. Man found dead in Walmart parking lot. The article didn't give many details, only that a man in his late 30s had been found near the back of the lot, his car still there, engine running. The cause of death was unknown. I clicked on the article, my heart pounding in my chest. There was a photo of the man attached to the report, and when I saw it, I froze. It was him, the man from the store. The same face I had glimpsed beneath that hood, now staring back at me, lifeless. I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if something, or someone, got to him before he could get to me. But every time I think about that night, I'm haunted by the thought that if I hadn't run when I did, I might have been the one they found in that parking lot instead. I haven't been back to Walmart since, and I don't plan on going anytime soon. What did you guys think? Did I make the right decision? I never thought I'd be saying this, but I'm pretty sure my local Walmart is haunted. I know how that sounds. It's a Walmart, not some creepy old mansion or an abandoned asylum. But trust me, there's something weird going on there, and I'm not the only one who's noticed. It all started a couple of months ago. I had just moved to a new town for work, and since I didn't know many people yet, I found myself doing a lot of late-night Walmart runs. You know, grabbing snacks, some random household items, just passing time, really. The first few trips were normal, but then one night, something strange happened. It was about 11:30 p.m., and I was wandering down the cereal aisle, minding my own business. As I reached for a box of Frosted Flakes, I heard a faint voice behind me. "Don't buy that." I froze. It wasn't a normal voice. It was soft and distant, like someone was whispering from the far end of the aisle. I spun around, expecting to see another late-night shopper, but there was no one there. Just me, a bunch of cereal boxes, and the faint buzzing of the fluorescent lights above. I stood there for a second, half expecting someone to jump out and yell, "Gotcha!" But after a moment of silence, I shook it off and grabbed the cereal. Maybe I was just hearing things, or maybe the Walmart speaker system was acting up. Yeah, that had to be it. I continued my shopping, but as I made my way through the store, I kept hearing strange noises. Footsteps that didn't belong to anyone. The faint sound of someone humming a tune I couldn't quite place. And weirdest of all, an occasional cold breeze that would blow through certain aisles. And trust me, no Walmart air conditioning has ever felt that cold. Still, I wasn't ready to declare the place haunted just yet. Maybe I was just tired. Or maybe this particular Walmart had some quirks. But then, things got weirder. The next time I went, it was around midnight. I was browsing the electronics section when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A TV screen flickering on its own. I walked over to it, thinking maybe it was on some kind of demo mode. But when I got closer, the screen changed. It wasn't showing an ad or a movie. It was displaying a grainy, black and white security camera feed. And right there, in the middle of the feed, was me. Now, I know Walmart has cameras everywhere, but this was different. The feed was showing me in real time, standing in front of the TVs, but there was something else on the screen too. Something standing behind me. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. But as I squinted at the screen, I saw it more clearly. A shadowy figure, tall and featureless, hovering just behind my left shoulder. My heart jumped into my throat, and I whipped around, ready to confront, well, I don't know what I was expecting to see. But when I turned, there was no one there. The electronics aisle was completely empty, except for me. I looked back at the TV, and the screen had returned to normal. Just a wall of ads for sound systems and new movie releases. I stood there, feeling like I had just stepped into the Twilight Zone. At this point, I was getting pretty freaked out. But what could I do? I wasn't about to call Walmart customer service and report a ghost. Yes, hello, I'd like to file a complaint about your haunted TV section. Yeah, that would go over well. Still, I wasn't about to give up on my shopping trip. I grabbed a new phone charger and headed to the checkout lanes, trying to shake off the weirdness. I figured that once I got home, I could laugh it off. Maybe tell a few friends and make it sound funny, like, hey, guess what? The Walmart ghosts are on a midnight shift now. But just as I reached the checkout, something happened that I couldn't laugh off. I was standing in front of the self-checkout machines when one of them suddenly beeped. The screen lit up with a message. Please scan your item. I wasn't anywhere near it. I didn't even have my cart with me yet. I looked around to see if an employee was playing a prank, but there was no one nearby. Just me, an empty lane of checkout machines, and that one screen demanding I scan my non-existent item. I cautiously stepped toward it, half expecting something to jump out at me. But instead, the machine started scanning. Nothing. It beeped again, and the screen said $6.66. Perfect. At this point, I was done. I wasn't about to stick around and see what else this haunted Walmart had in store for me. I abandoned my cart, grabbed my keys, and made a beeline for the exit. As I passed through the automatic doors, I could have sworn I heard that voice again, soft and playful this time. Come back soon. I haven't been back since. Call me superstitious, but I'm not in the mood to be the next Walmart ghost story. And besides, I can always shop at Target instead. I hear their ghosts are much more polite.